Part 4. God's promise triumphs through northern Israel. Judah fell into idolatry, so God allowed Pharaoh Shishak to plunder the temple only 5 years after the death of King Solomon in 931 BC, as inscribed on the walls of the Temple of Karnak in Egypt. But God rescued King Abijah of Judah from a massive attack by northern Israel, in their first of 3 major attempts to destroy King David's family. King Jehoshaphat restored the temple, so the prophet Joel foretold that God would protect Judah from an attack by many nations. While in northern Israel, God had the prophet Elijah confront King Ahab and Queen Jezebel as they tried to murder all of God's prophets in northern Israel and spread idolatry. But King Jehoshaphat made a big mistake as he helped northern Israel and made one of King Ahab's daughters his queen in Judah, which endangered King David's family in the second of 3 major attempts by northern Israel to wipe them out. And yet God rescued King Jehoshaphat and Judah from an attack by 3 nations, as Joel prophesied. And God empowered the prophet Elisha to work many miracles to help God's prophets in northern Israel, as he saw God take the prophet Elijah up in a fiery chariot. The Moabite stone, written around 830 BC, is displayed in the Louvre Museum in Paris and talks about Jehovah as the God of King David's family and about King Ahab of northern Israel. Queen Athaliah, the daughter of King Ahab of northern Israel, took over the throne of Judah and killed all of King David's family, except the small child Joash, who was hidden in the temple and made king at age 6. So God had Elisha order Jehu to kill King Ahab's family in northern Israel to protect King David's family in Judah. But God also had the prophet Amos foretell judgment on Judah for their corruption after Athaliah's reign. Northern Israel withered from attacks by enemy nations after Jehu became king. The black obelisk in the British Museum shows King Jehu bowing to the king of Assyria. So God had the prophet Jonah help northern Israel overcome its enemies, but he forgot that God cares about all nations. So he refused to help Assyria and its capital of Nineveh until God had him swallowed by a great fish for 3 days, after which he emerged alive, which was a powerful sign for the coming one to bless all nations. God had the prophet Hosea marry an unfaithful wife to show how God felt about northern Israel. Yet they did not listen and urged Assyria to destroy King David's family in Judah. But Assyria attacked northern Israel instead and took Galilee, which became a very dark place. So northern Israel joined with the king of Damascus to try to destroy Judah in their 3rd and final major attempt to wipe out King David's family, even while King Ahaz of Judah shut the temple. But Assyria destroyed northern Israel instead. And yet, how was God's promise to bless all nations through King David's family ever going to come true when Assyria now turned to destroy Judah also? Part 5. God's promise triumphs through Assyria. The prophet Isaiah foretold that God would stop the Assyrians and that God will bring peace to all nations one day. So King Hezekiah of Judah sought God's help and compiled the book of Proverbs as he restored the temple. But Assyria plundered Judah and attacked Jerusalem. Even at the same time as the prophet Micah foretold that God's king from David's family to bless all nations would come from the little town of Bethlehem right outside the walls of Jerusalem. So King Hezekiah of Judah prayed in the temple for God's help against Assyria. And God's angel slew the Assyrian army, as the prophet Isaiah foretold. But God had to rebuke King Hezekiah for becoming an ally of Babylon instead of trusting him. King Sennacherib's prism was written in Assyria around 689 BC and is displayed at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, and talks about his attack on King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. The disappearance of the Assyrian army was one of the great mysteries of history and was talked about by ancient nations like the Greek Herodotus and the Chaldean Berosus. God then showed the prophet Isaiah that he anointed one as Messiah or Christ to bless all nations. And he foretold that one named Cyrus would destroy Babylon in the distant future. But King Manasseh became the next king of Judah and murdered God's people, and it seems even the prophet Isaiah. Yet when King Manasseh was captured, he prayed to God for forgiveness, and God took pity on him and even restored him to the throne of Judah. But although King Manasseh tried to undo the evil he created in Judah, the land was now so corrupted by idolatry that nothing could help Judah anymore. So the prophets Nahum and Zephaniah now foretold that both Assyria and Judah would face God's judgment. So when Babylon attacked Assyria, the Egyptians tried to help Assyria. And the prophet Jeremiah mourned when King Josiah of Judah was killed at Megiddo, as he tried to be an ally of Babylon like King Hezekiah and stop Egypt from helping Assyria, although the prophets told Josiah not to do that. And this was essentially the end of the kingdom of Judah, for only 3 of his sons and 1 grandson reigned briefly before its destruction. Then the Babylonians defeated the Assyrians at the Battle of Carchemish. So how was God's promise to bless all nations ever going to come true, when Babylon then turned on Judah to destroy them along with Egypt after defeating Assyria's capital of Nineveh? Part 6. God's promise triumphs through Babylon. The prophet Habakkuk saw that God was not going to spare Judah this time as he did before with Assyria. And King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Judah and took Daniel and other youth of Judah's nobility captive to Babylon. But Daniel and his friends were faithful to God while in Babylon. So God blessed them by revealing a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. And King Nebuchadnezzar made Daniel and his friends governors in Babylon, for he could see their exceptional wisdom, and this helped the Jews who were going to be captive there. And God even protected them when Daniel's friends were thrown into a fiery furnace by King Nebuchadnezzar. Then King Nebuchadnezzar went back to Judah again, and took the prophet Ezekiel and King Josiah's grandson, King Jehoiachin of Judah, captive to Babylon as well. This ration record, written in Babylon around 569 BC, is displayed in the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, and lists the rations fed to captured King Jehoiachin of Judah while he was captive in Babylon. But God revealed to the prophet Jeremiah that he would only allow the captivity of Judah and Babylon to last 70 years, showing that this was totally under God's control. And then God revealed his power over all nations in a powerful vision to the prophet Ezekiel in Babylon. So although God let Babylon defeat Judah and exile the Jews to Babylon, still God was the one who controlled their future. And God even spared the prophet Jeremiah, who then wrote Lamentations from Egypt. Then God showed the prophet Ezekiel a vision of dry bones that came back to life, as his people would. And God showed the prophet Ezekiel a vision of a new temple that would replace the temple destroyed by the Babylonians, that had a river of life flowing out from it, foretelling powerful plans God had for his people. While at the same time, God humbled King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon by driving him insane for 7 years until he acknowledged God as his ruler. And God even had King Evil-Merodach of Babylon show favor to King Jehoiachin while he was captive. But Daniel interpreted handwriting from God on the palace wall in Babylon that foretold its destruction. So how can God's promise to bless all nations through the Messiah ever come true when the Jews were exiled inside Babylon, and now the Persians were coming to destroy it?